Hey guys, it's quite common in Japan to meet people or families that have houses that are on pieces of land that have been in their families for longer than they know. So sometimes you'll meet somebody who has an old house like one of the ones we're showing you, and we'll say, how long has your family been on this piece of land? And sometimes they'll say, oh, my grandparents lived here, but before that we don't really know. You know, the city records, the oldest city records show our family name here. You know, how many years back does it go? Oh, we don't really know. We know it's at least 200 years. Before that, there's no record, so we don't really know. And because what's often happened too is, over the years, different houses have been there, and then the family's demolished them and built a new house. And then 100 years later, they've demolished it and built a new house. And then, you know, the house that's there now might be 40 years old, or 80 years old, or 100 years old. And so then what happens is that when people are too old to live in the house anymore, or when they pass away, the family has a dilemma, because they have to either sell the house, which if it's been in the family for longer than everybody knows is quite difficult, or emotionally, or so sell the house, or another family member can move into the house. But usually what happens is Japanese people usually don't like renovating old houses. It's a pretty rare thing to do, to renovate an old house. So to renovate an old house and move into it's a bit unusual thing to do. Or demolish the old house and build another new one there, which has been the tradition over hundreds of years, which is why it's still in the family. So that's their choices. Quite often what happens though is, as in the example of the houses that we've been showing you, nothing happens to the house. So it just sits empty. And it's quite common in Japan to come across houses that are just empty, and they've been empty for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. It quite often happens because the family are connected to the house in not just a historical way or a nostalgic way. There's more to it than that, because as we've mentioned before with the festivals, talking about festivals in Japan, there's a strong connection between the spirits of ancestors and these old properties quite often. And quite often what they'll have in them is, one of the things they do often pass down is butsudan and kamidana and the other religious type shrines and things that they've had over the years. And sometimes they even include bones that have belonged to ancestors, or small pieces of bone that have belonged to ancestors, because that's been kept there. So quite often these houses are just kept, and everybody's sort of busy. They're living in different cities with their families, and they've got their lives going on, and then the grandparents pass away, and then the house is just sitting empty. And they want to keep it because it's got this strong spiritual connection to the family, but nobody can live there because they're all busy with their lives in other cities and doing other things, and so they just keep it. And sometimes people will rarely go there, or it's also common that people will go there for Obon, which is in August, which is when the festival is for the ancestors coming to visit. And quite often what they'll do is, and what triggered this video is, we know some people who've just done this, that they only go to the old house twice a year. They have a gardener that goes there a few times a year to tidy the place up, and they go there a couple of times a year. They go there at Obon in August, and they take a priest. They take a Shinto priest, and he does a Shinto ceremony in there. And other people will sometimes do it with a Buddhist priest or Buddhist monk, and they'll take them to the house and do a ceremony in the house to welcome the ancestors to the house, or welcome them back to the house. And then 3 or 4 days later they'll do another ceremony to say goodbye to them, and they'll go away again. And sometimes they'll do another ceremony around New Year, the shogatsu type ceremony in the house as well. So for that spiritual reason, quite often these houses are just in limbo. So the families want to keep the house because they can't bring themselves to sell it, because it's got the strong spiritual connection to the family, strong family ties. But logistically it doesn't work for them to live there anymore, because of course traditionally in the past people would have stayed in their towns generation after generation after generation. But with the modern society, of course, you know, particularly smaller towns. Like a lot of the houses we've been showing you are actually in smaller towns, and the families move away, or the people move away to get jobs in the big cities and things, and start their families there and have a new house there. And of course that's the other thing as well, as we've shown you on our Buying a House in Japan playlist. Japanese people really aren't into living in older houses. Usually if you see an older house, it usually has older people in it, and most everybody wants a new house. So if they can, they'll build a new house on that same piece of land, but quite often that place is just not where they need to be. That their work is somewhere else, their job's somewhere else, and their family's somewhere else. They need to be somewhere else. So quite common, these scenes we've been showing you with these old houses, quite common to see around Japan. They're usually valued, if they are sold, if the families do decide to sell, usually they're valued at the price of the land minus the cost of demolishing the old house, even if the house is only 30 years old. That's the way it's valued. The land's worth $100,000, the cost of demolishing the old house is $20,000, so that place is worth $80,000, that style of thing. Double that if you're near a city, or triple it, or quadruple it, or whatever. So anyway, hopefully somebody found that interesting. More videos coming soon.